Hundreds of years ago, in the hearts and minds of the Japanese, whales weren't just massive creatures roaming the ocean. They were seen as precious gifts, sources of food, fuel, and fortune to generations of fishermen. The whale symbolized both the harsh reality of the sea and the endurance it demanded to survive. Japan is an island nation with little farmland and few natural resources, so its people turned instinctively to the sea. Their entire way of life, food, faith, and folklore grew from it. In that world, the whale appeared like a blessing from the deep, a single creature capable of feeding an entire community, lighting lamps, and even inspiring art. Stories and rituals that still echo today. By the 17th century, coastal villages across Japan had begun forming dedicated whaling teams. At first, they relied only on simple tools: spears, wooden harpoons, ropes, and small sailboats. Everything was done by hand, guided by centuries-old traditions and rituals passed down through families. Catching a single giant whale meant months of plenty for the entire village. And when that happened, people held solemn ceremonies to thank the spirit of the whale, praying for safety and calm seas ahead. Along Japan's southern coasts, especially in the Wakayama and Kyushu regions, small shrines known as Kujira Jinja were built, honoring the souls of whales that gave themselves to feed humankind. Owatim, the hunt itself became more organized, more precise. When a whale was sighted, the whaling ship would close in at high speed, aiming a harpoon gun at the spot just behind the head or near the chest, believed to deliver the most fatal blow. It was the moment that decided whether the sea would feed the village or claim more lives instead. The harpoon was often fitted with explosives, so when it pierced the whale's body, it detonated, shattering organs and speeding up death. At least, that was the intention. In reality, many whales continued to thrash and struggle in agony for long minutes before the sea finally went still. It's an image that has fueled strong opposition from animal rights groups around the world. Once the whale was dead, the crew would hook a thick cable to the carcass. Support ships hauled it either back to shore or to a massive mothership waiting offshore. There, the butchering began in operation, as methodical as it was industrial. Workers, armed with long, razor-sharp knives, sliced away the thick layers of skin and fat before dividing up the red meat, organs, bones, and tendons. The meat was cut into large slabs, processed or frozen for storage. The blubber was boiled down to extract oil, used both as food and for industry. Bones were ground into fertilizer. Even the whale's tendons and whiskers found new life in handicrafts and traditional medicine, echoing the old Japanese belief that nothing from a sacrificed creature should ever go to waste. The first task was always the same: dealing with the thick, heavy skin and fat that wrapped the whale's massive frame. Carvers stood in a line, moving in rhythm. Each stroke of the blade traced a long, clean cut from head to tail. Then, piece by piece, they peeled off sections of fat and skin, each weighing tens, sometimes hundreds of kilograms. Those slabs were tied with ropes, hoisted up by cranes, and hauled away to be rendered into oil or other products. To many, the sight was horrifying. An enormous body slowly revealing its deep red flesh beneath the skin, as bright and dark as fresh blood. It was a scene both mesmerizing and unsettling, a reminder of the fine line between tradition and brutality. Once the thick layer of fat is stripped away, the real work begins: cutting the meat. Whale meat isn't like ordinary fish. It's dense, fibrous, and dark red, more like the flesh of a land mammal, rich with blood and muscle. Each carver must follow the grain of the meat precisely, slicing along every muscle line to preserve its texture and value. Every cut demands strength, accuracy, and years of practice. These heavy, red slabs are sent to sorting areas where the finest parts are separated. The soft, tender cuts near the fins and belly are saved for sashimi or other high-end dishes. The firmer meat is simmered, stewed, or ground into whale sausage. Even the lesser pieces are turned into industrial feed or pet food. Nothing goes to waste. That philosophy of use, everything runs deep in Japanese tradition, born from centuries of surviving off the sea. The whale's internal organs are treated with the same care. Once the massive body cavity is opened, workers remove the heart, liver, stomach, and intestines one by one, carefully and deliberately. The liver, enormous and rich in vitamin A, once served as an important nutritional source during Japan's post-war years of scarcity. The heart, sometimes weighing hundreds of kilograms, is prized for its dense, iron-rich muscle. The stomach and intestines are cleaned, processed into traditional foods, or drilled for later use. For first-time witnesses, the sight feels more like a giant dissection than a harvest. But for the fishermen, this is their craft, a skill passed down through generations, vital to feeding their communities. Even the skeleton isn't wasted. Once the meat and organs are gone, the massive bones are separated. Some are ground into powder for fertilizer. Others preserved in museums or enshrined in temples. In certain coastal towns, giant whale skulls still hang as sacred relics, reminders of sacrifice and gratitude toward the sea. The tendons and whiskers are dried for handicrafts and traditional medicine, Even the blood that flows during the butchering is collected, processed into fertilizer or industrial products. Every part of the whale serves a purpose, nothing left behind. To the Japanese, this complete utilization is a mark of pride, proof of efficiency, discipline, and respect for what the ocean provides. In contrast, they often view Western hunting methods as wasteful. The entire process is not just mechanical but ceremonial, a carefully choreographed ritual of labor. Each worker knows his role. One cuts fat, another removes meat, another handles organs, another sorts and weighs. Every movement of the knife, every pull of the rope reflects generations of knowledge, working in unison, almost like a living machine. To outsiders, it may seem brutal, but to them, it's noble work, a disappearing tradition that defines who they are. And when the final cut is made, many villages hold memorial ceremonies, chanting prayers for the whale's spirit, a solemn gesture that somehow blends reverence with cruelty, compassion with contradiction. In Japan's whaling culture, the line between gratitude and blood runs impossibly thin, but that same precision and devotion that define Japan's whaling tradition are also the very reasons it faces global criticism today. Animal rights organizations argue that, no matter how thoroughly the whale is used, the act itself remains inhumane. They point out that whales are intelligent beings with complex social lives, creatures that deserve protection, not slaughter. The contrast is haunting, gleaming knives slicing through red flesh, followed by solemn prayers for the whale's spirit. It's a paradox that outsiders struggle to understand. For many Japanese fishermen, however, giving up whaling would mean losing more than income. It would mean losing a piece of their identity. A heritage woven into their families for centuries. Whale hunting and processing in Japan are both a historical memory and a living cultural symbol, inseparable from the rhythm of coastal life. The butchering process reflects a national mindset, meticulous, disciplined, and grounded in the belief that every resource must be respected and fully used. It is both an act of reverence and of violence. History shows that during Japan's post-war years of hunger, whale meat helped feed an entire nation. It became part of the collective memory, tied to survival itself. But in modern Japan, the appetite for whale meat has dropped sharply. Today, the industry survives mostly through political protection and a sense of cultural pride. This ongoing clash between Japan's traditions and international conservation values reveals a deep global divide. To the fishermen, butchering whales remains a craft. A point of pride, a skill passed down through bloodlines. To much of the outside world, it appears brutal, outdated, and at odds with modern ethics on animal welfare. That tension between culture and conscience is what keeps Japan's whaling story alive and controversial, because in the end, the future of this ancient industry will depend on a fragile balance between three forces: biological conservation, cultural heritage, and the mounting weight of international pressure. In 2019, Japan formally withdrew from the International Whaling Commission, the IWC. After more than 30 years of participating under restrictions, that decision marked the country's return to commercial whaling in its own territorial waters. Since then, Japan's annual whale catch has averaged between 100 and 200 animals, mostly mink and bride's whales, a fraction of what was taken in the mid-20th century, yet still enough to ignite global protests. International observers point out that whale meat now represents less than 0.1% of Japan's total meat consumption. According to the Fisheries Agency, less than 30% of the catch is actually sold each year, while the rest ends up in storage or government-subsidized school meals.
While the rest ends up in storage or government-subsidized school meals, critics argue that this proves modern whaling is no longer an economic necessity.
Critics argue that this proves modern whaling is no longer an economic necessity, but a politically protected tradition. Meanwhile, surveys from the Nippon Research Center show that fewer than 10% of Japanese people eat whale meat regularly. Most are indifferent to it. Yet among older fishermen in towns like Taiji or Kushiro, whaling remains a matter of honor and identity, a link to ancestors who lived and died by the sea. It's this emotional divide between a fading market and a proud tradition that makes Japan's whaling story not just about animals or economics, but about how a nation chooses to remember who it is. So now the question is yours. Is Japan's whaling tradition a symbol of cultural pride or a relic of cruelty that no longer belongs in the modern world? Can tradition ever justify taking the life of a creature as intelligent and social as the whale? Or is the ocean finally asking humanity to stop? Tell us what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. If you believe stories like this need to be told, make sure to like, subscribe, and join the Real Shock community, where every story dives deeper and every wave hides another truth. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for standing with those who respect the sea. We'll see you in the next reel.